Like there was a time when Google Plus was actually really nice for keeping track, for example, of machine learning discussions, where people would have really nice discussions about the latest research in machine learning.
Right. So for the 5 people who's interested in machine learning and using Google Plus, it's a great thing to have.
Yeah.
Wait. What's the name of this podcast? What?
Welcome to the AI Business Podcast. This is episode 17, where you'll find everything you want to know about AI, in this particular case, Google, and what is going on. So my name is Tien. I'm the video producer of Informa Tech, and joining me as always is our global editor, Max Smolaks.
A good time of day.
And as always, who's ready to grill Google, who's been thinking about this day for all of his adult life, Sebastian Maas, deputy editor of DCD.
Bing for life. That's what I'm saying.
Like I said, we talk about Google, but we don't want to feel like we're just bashing Google without an outside opinion. In this case, we found a friend, an ally, or could he speak for Google? We don't know. He is Roland Szabo. Can I call you a friend? I think you're a friend.
Yes. Yeah.
I wasn't invited to your wedding, though.
Ooh.
He
didn't put it on his Google Calendar and he forgot.
he was coding the calendar. So Roland Szabo, so you were a former Google employee, so we'll start there so the audience know who you are and kind of recognize your voice. And you work at Google in Switzerland for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And you're from Romania.
Yeah.
Any siblings? No, sorry. So let's quickly go through your experience at Google and like how you move on and where you are now.
I'm Roland, and as Tien introduced me, I worked at Google. I joined Google right after finishing college. I studied in Romania, and in my last year in university, a recruiter from Google sent me an email saying that, hey, we saw that you know Linux on GitHub, and do you want to talk? I was like, sure, Google wants to talk to me. Why would I say no? I passed all the interviews. I had like 3 phone screens, 5 in-person interviews, and in the end I got the offer.
So what did you study at uni?
So I did study computer science degree. I wasn't a Linux expert by any means, except I had done all my operating systems homeworks, and I placed all the homeworks on GitHub, and they included lots of shell files, awk, bash, and all these kind of things. And the recruiter just saw that and said, oh, this guy knows Linux. So I...
How did they hire you specifically for the Canada team, or do you have some kind of control of where you go?
No. So initially, they hired me as an SRE. That's a site reliability engineer. I didn't really know what that was. I didn't know on what team I would be or anything. I just showed up on September 1st in the Zurich office, and then I got told, hey, you'll be on the Gmail and Google Drive team. After about 1.5 years or 2 years, I made a switch to become a SWE, a software engineer, and then I moved to the Google Calendar team.
And that's when you finally get fed up with everything.
How does career progression look at Google? So you've told us something interesting about the levels they have. So what are these levels and what do they mean?
Okay, so when I started as level 3, which is called Software Engineer 1. And then level 4 software, so level 3 is for college graduates, like fresh out of school. That's what you get. If you have a couple of years of experience, you would usually go for level 4. That's software engineer 2. Level 5 was senior software engineer. Level 6 was staff software engineer, then senior staff, then distinguished, senior distinguished, and principal or something like that.
Wait, so who's level 1?
Yeah, it's weird because it's for software engineers, it starts at level 3. It starts at level 3 because I think to have a comparison so you can judge roughly the relative, I don't know what to say, importance or impact across different career ladders. So in project management or in, hardware operations, there you might have somebody starting from levels 1 or 2, but you know that somebody who is a project manager level 5 is around the same level of influence as a software engineer of level 5. Even if they do completely different things, they should be able to do similar things in scope.
Right, and you were saying there's mostly difference in pay grade.
Yes.
What I find interesting is, like, as a culture, Google has tried to foster that concept of you can talk to anyone on any team and any kind of level, or however you want to call it, which benefited them from a research and development perspective, but now is biting them up in the ass from the workers are collaborating and raising concerns perspective.
You could even say organizing, yes.
Organizing.
Yes, there was always lots of discussion. There were lots of mailing lists inside Google where people could talk freely. And sometimes, unfortunately, those discussions devolved pretty bad and got some pretty heated arguments. But on the other hand, it was like really nice because you could go and ask somebody on a completely different team and they could help you, or you could go and contribute. Like you find a bug in a project that's unrelated to what you're working on, and you can go and fix it. And people were in general quite friendly and helpful. During the time I was at Google, I actually got to visit about 10 or 11 offices. Whenever I would go somewhere, either on business trips or on personal trips, I could visit the offices there. And honestly, the Zurich office was one of the nicest ones. Like the designers invested a lot of time in making stuff there. On every floor, you had these thematic micro kitchens where you could go for a snack. And there was like a Lego micro kitchen where you could go and play with Legos and build stuff on a wall.
Do you actually have time to do that? With my office, we had stuff to play with, but there was never time to actually do it. And then the boss would stare at you if you started trying to relax.
My boss definitely never stared at me.
He doesn't know who you are.
It happened once that I didn't see my manager for like 2 months. So that was part of it.
That sounds
What
great.
a blessing.
Right, so I guess what Seb is saying, like, are you overall super busy and caught up with everything, or you kind of have a little free time at the end of the day and you can kick back a little bit?
In the team that I joined at the beginning, the Gmail and Google Drive SRE team, I was the youngest on the team. And I think there was like 1 or 2 other people who didn't have kids. Everyone else had a family. So at 6 o'clock, they, ran out the door pretty much. I usually stayed the latest because, hey, the dinner started at 6:30 and I didn't want to cook for myself or go out and pay for food. And I would also go to the gym in the evening. So that's why I would stay until 7 or 8 p.m. at the office.
Okay, I didn't know you were flexing about you going to the gym, but fine.
So, I mean, on the machine learning side, obviously Google and all the big tech, and pretty much every tech company likes to make it seem like everything that happens is down to fantastic AI. How much was actually strong quality AI? How much was just hot fixes, stuff kind of duct taped together to work just about without breaking?
So the code base at Google is surprisingly good quality. So there are not that many duct tape things and hot fixes and whatnot. They apply best practices in engineering to develop their products. But there are products that are very much with machine learning, like Google Photos. That's what makes the difference. That's what sets apart Google Photos from all the other, or Picasso, or whatever was before that. Like machine learning is the secret sauce.
So Roland, kind of fast forward to your time at Google, and you ultimately left in 2017?
2018, in January 2018. So it's almost 3 years today.
I feel like 3 years ago, Google was a more, at least outwardly, innocent company. Like, have you seen a shift compared to when you were there and where it is now?
There was a small shift that I noticed from 2014 when I started there, and 2018 when I left. Was a holiday gift. In 2014, we got a nice holiday gift. While by 2017, I think the holiday gift was like, oh, we made a donation in your name.
That was the last straw for you.
There's a difference between receiving a phone and having a donation made in your name.
If somebody make a donation so somebody can have fresh water, that bothers you.
It wasn't that. The donation was Chromebooks, I think. They were giving away Chromebooks.
That's not a donation.
But not to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just winning over a customer while they're young.
What was it like, I guess, right before you left? What was the culture like? What makes you make that decision to move on?
The biggest reason why I left was I was fed up with being in a long-distance relationship. My wife couldn't move to Switzerland, so I preferred to move back. But the other thing was that I was anyway considering leaving Google, you feel like a small cog in a big machine. When I left, Google had something like, 70,000, 80,000 employees. Any change you wanted to make, you were working on a new feature, it would take months or even several quarters until it would get in front of users. And basically, as a software engineer, that's what I want to do. I want to make stuff that is useful for people, and it's hard to do it. It takes too long, and you just don't feel as much of an impact. And
do you think that's inherent in just when a corporation reaches a certain scale, that there's always going to be so many cooks fiddling with things and so many stakeholders that's always going to happen, or is that a structural thing that Google could change?
Some parts I don't think can be changed. For example, security reviews and legal reviews, like you would have to go that, because when a company becomes a certain size, you will attract the attention of hackers, you will attract the attention of other people, others who just want to sue you for the smallest mistake. So legal and security have to sign off, and then privacy and so on. And the other thing is that at Google scale, making some changes and making sure that they are scalable, that the product won't just fall over and crash horribly when 1 billion people try to access it.
And what about the impact of individual developers? Like, is there anyone working for Google who can say, like, there's a new feature coming out, and that was my idea, that was my feature. So can you have, as a developer, individual impact on, for example, Google features?
As a developer, yeah, maybe you can say you coded it up or did it, but in general, the PMs do have a lot of impact on the direction you're going. So what will you work on? What is prioritized?
Is there is that something that each campus is able to kind of decide on itself, or does it always end up going back to the American headquarters?
In this regard, Google, the calendar team was really lucky because we were all based in Zurich. So the whole calendar team was in Zurich, and pretty much everything that was related to calendar got decided in Zurich.
I mean, the other thing Google does, which is again common in bigger companies, is they pit certain teams against each other. So the Google Brain and DeepMind kind of rivalry is quite well reported on. Would they do it on something like a more enterprisey focused thing like the calendar, or is that just let's have one team that focuses on this?
I wouldn't put it as Google pits one team against the other. It's more of a product the byproduct of the fact that to get promoted, you need to show impact at a higher level. So you cannot get promoted to the next level until you prove that you have already been working for half a year or 1 year at that level. You have to have an impact larger than your team, larger than your immediate organization. And the easiest way to do that is to launch something new.
Right.
So people are very much incentivized to start a new project when they want to get promoted. And if 2 people in different parts of the company have the same idea, they'll both launch it so they can get promoted. And then that's how you'll end up with 2, 3, 4, 5, 18 different chat apps.
And a lot of them don't see the light of day.
It'd be better if they didn't see them. The problem is they do release them, and then like
not a single one has been good. Not a single one.
Do you feel that frustration towards the end?
Oh yeah, so like this is a constant joke at Google that at Google there are always 2 ways to do anything. One is the green banana that is not yet ripe, and the other is the overripe banana that is already almost black or completely black.
I think we've covered enough about your experience at Google, and we're going to talk about your departure a little more and what you've been doing since a little later. But for now, while we have you here, we decided to debut a segment called In Fairness to Google. So this is a segment that I created just for mostly for Sab. What are your takes? I know you said that there's some preliminary, some form of union in the Zurich office in Europe, but not that's not the case in US because we're always about 10 years behind in workers' rights. So in fairness to Google, I guess unionization makes sense. Does it make sense to you, Roland?
Honestly, not really. For at least as a software engineer, you could easily find another job and vote with your feet. That was my take at the time. Maybe for other kinds of workers or something, it might make more sense. But at the time, I didn't feel like, hey, my rights were being encroached or something.
I mean, that's the point of a union, though, is to have the more successful people are the power chip to support the less successful members of the company. And then on the front of the being able to get a job elsewhere, one of the reasons why people have been able to get a job elsewhere is because the US government stopped Eric Schmidt and Steve Jobs' secret list where they would make sure that they didn't hire each other's candidates.
Right.
So, in fairness to Google,
Okay, God.
There it is.
it wasn't that they weren't hiring from each other. It was that they weren't cold calling candidates.
That's still illegal.
Yeah, I agreed. It was illegal. But if a Google employee wanted to go to Apple or the other way around, and they contacted the recruiter from the other company, the process would go on as normal. So they could still vote with their feet in that way, in that sense.
Yeah.
It's also to protect to not being penalized for those people who share their opinions online, or it's not just about losing your jobs. It's also you don't want to be punished for what you believe in, your political viewpoints and stuff. So that's all part of the deal.
Yeah, I think in fairness to Google, that they have generally allowed mass movements within their people to say, look, we don't want to do this contract, we don't want to do that contract. When journalists were able to say that they're doing this Project Maven military contract, Google employees protested and they stopped doing it. They may have unfairly dismissed a couple of people involved in that, but as a whole, they stopped doing those contracts.
They also dismissed a couple of people fairly, like James Damore, right? So that was a sort of like a publicly driven decision.
All right. So in fairness to Google, all right, let's go through the news story. And Timnit Gerbu, this is ongoing. She went on Bloomberg and said she definitely did not resign. She got fired because she...
she did threaten to quit before. And like when somebody threatens to quit, like you think that, hey, maybe they will do things in their own best interest.
To give some context, obviously, for people who haven't been following the story, she was the co-lead of the AI ethics group.
Right.
She did some research paper that raised ethics concerns. Google has said, we didn't want to publish it because it wasn't sourced correctly. It didn't get every perspective correct. She says they didn't want to publish it because it potentially put Google's own algorithms in a negative light. She claims she went through all the steps. I generally side with the fact that her team all say she went through the steps. They all said that the way this was handled was surprising and shocking. Well, even if it turns out, let's go with the Google version of things, that this paper wasn't done correctly. How would you think holding it back, firing her without a proper discussion, and then shutting down all forms of communication isn't going to blow up when she has a very large public following, lots of contact with journalists, lots of fans in the machine learning field? Like, that's just basic PR 101 that is going to backfire.
In fairness to Google, the paper's actual title is On the Dangers of Stochastic Parrots. Can language models be too big? And it was sort of like meant to launch exactly at the same time as Google unveiled literally the largest AI language model ever made. So,
don't hire a researcher who looks into these things. Then,
right. I feel like they are asking for it. I would say, in fairness to Google, we're only hearing one side, and Sundar Pichai wrote a tweet to kind of basically apologize to her, in which she claimed that that's not an apology to her. I need to hear. She wants to get something personal. She said the apology only counts when he reached out to me directly. So Roland, your perspective, and if you want to be in fairness to Google on this one.
So I read the paper, or I skimmed through the paper as it came out this week. And while, yes, it does have some criticism about, language models being too large, that's actually a weird criticism. First of all, I'm pretty sure some of Google's other services use more power and have a larger carbon footprint. Like, okay, sure, machine learning is consuming a lot of resources, but search serves, I don't know how many billion or trillion requests per second. That has a huge footprint. You're not saying anything about that. Why do you single out machine learning? Because you're an AI ethicist, of course. But the other problem is that it's not just a problem of larger models. Google just released the Switch transformer, which is the largest model that has ever been trained, 1.5 trillion. But the thing is that that's actually a more efficient model. It uses 7 times fewer resources than previous generation of machine learning models. So this problem is not necessarily the size of the model, it's the efficiency, because you can have a small model which is running inefficiently, which is an old version or something, and uses a lot more energy than a much bigger model, but which has sparser connections or uses some more advanced training techniques. So it's a lot better. And the other thing is, okay, sure, training is expensive, but once you train the model, you start using it in production, and then the costs get amortized because running it in production is much cheaper. And if you have, I don't know, 1 billion users using your model and they get better results on, I don't know, Google search or whatever, maybe the math works out in the long run.
So you would fire her in a heartbeat, is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that I don't see why the paper was a reason to fire her.
Right. So do you think there's more to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also think, I mean, that's if they essentially tried to style that division on academia, and in academia, it would have been, if you read that paper and those things you wouldn't agree with, like the bits Roland brought up, that would just be another paper. That would be the rebuttal. That's the process.
Exactly.
It's just, this is not how you handle disputes, and it was always going to spill out into the public domain.
So this is primarily a PR failure rather than like a serious technology issue.
So in fairness to Google, because they made such a massive PR disaster, they've raised awareness of the issue.
Right.
That's
quite some second order thinking there.
Focus on the positives, I say. A few things mentioned to mention on Google's largest AI and language model is of course a giant advert for TPUs, and you're right, and it's just like and for Google, efficiency is very much like the core of what they're trying to do with this. So and the hardware, it's not just the software that has become more efficient because it's TensorFlow. The TPUs, the last generation TPUs, the fourth generation TPUs are also 2.7 times faster than third generation TPUs in some benchmarks. So these are ASICs, right? They're developed specifically for AI, specifically for TensorFlow. They're liquid cooled, which I find very, very exciting. These TPUs, the more efficient ones, are now power products like Google Search, Google Photos, Google Translate, and others. So yeah, this technology is becoming more accessible. It's becoming, it consumes less power to run.
I think, I mean, DPUs, it goes back to a point that we've talked about a lot in previous episodes, which is the bifurcation of the chip stack, so that essentially every major multi-trillion-dollar tech corporation has its own chip products. It's great for the end user, but it's obviously weird because it means you can't just use Google. If you're going to have to use Amazon if you want to use the Amazon chip, you're going to have to use Microsoft if their FPGA stuff is any good. And it's also odd for the kind of smaller tier data center providers because they just can't buy those chips.
And it will also be a problem for doing things like that support multi-cloud, because you're going to start to make an app that works well on AWS's Gravitron, and then somebody wants to move it to Azure or to GCP, and well, good luck.
Absolutely, yeah. So as a developer, do you look at this in horror and think like, okay, I know how to develop for TPUs. I will now have to learn a completely different architecture to develop for AWS.
It's pretty scary. Yes, there's this fragmentation. I mean, it's already pretty bad. Like in machine learning world, you have the TensorFlow, you have PyTorch. Then there's a new thing that's coming up, JAX. Then you have ONXX and so on. Lots of different frameworks, and sometimes you just have to make a decision and hope that you made the right one, and that's the one that will still be around in 5 to 10 years.
So you left Google, you go off to a startup. What systems were you using there?
As I had just left Google, I was a big Google advocate, and I actually convinced the startup that we should go down the GCP and not AWS. And we were very invested in the whole ecosystem from Google. Of course, we used TensorFlow, for example. We even used the AutoML tool sometimes. Then after about a year and a half, I switched to another startup, and the company was a Microsoft fanboy. So I had to learn all the Azure stuff. Yeah, the problem is that, they're different, but at the end of the day, both GCP's UI and the Azure UI, and it's like such pain to work with both of them. It's like,
how was the learning curve? Was it just easy to pick up for you, or was it just something that's just painful, as you were saying?
Honestly, that's something that I missed about Google, was that the internal stuff was much better than the external stuff.
Now we know.
Like there were some things, like if you wanted to start a big MapReduce, something that's running on 500 servers inside Google, I could do that and have it up and running in less than a minute. Outside, even starting a job on 50 machines would take 10 minutes at least.
We've talked about your time at Google. We've introduced you as a former Google employee. Obviously, Seb just asked you about what service you're using, and you were at a startup for a year and a half. And then,
Yeah.
dude, so many things happened in the last 2 years. And I feel like I'm losing
Well, it
track.
was
Every time I
2020.
talk to
It
you-
was 2020. Like that was like 20 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Every time I talk to you, correct. You've left that startup since then. You've also left Gmail, although I did send you an invite to your Gmail, so I would call you out as a hypocrite. And you move on since then from all of Google services, and now you're at a place where you're basically at home doing your own thing. So tell us a little bit what you're working on and what email service you're using and why.
So one of the main reasons why I left Gmail is because I wanted to have control over my email address, including the domain. Because one of the main risks with having a Gmail account is there is one term of service that applies to all the Google services, and you do some small mistake that bans, I don't know, the 18,000 page of that is goes against the 18,000 page of the terms of service, and you get the account banned, and bam, there goes your emails, your files, your photos, your everything that you is there.
I once lost a Google account, my university Google account. They warned us, in fairness, that this is going to happen at some point, but they didn't tell us when. So everything I no.
You shouldn't sell weed with your Google account, with your campus account.
No. So my Google account and all the services connected were lost forever, never to return again, because it's literally impossible. If your university switched off the service, it's impossible to get any of that stuff back. So it was very unpleasant.
All right. So, and Roland, what are you working on right now? I know you started your own machine learning consultant agency.
I started my own. I'm a self-employed machine learning consultant and trainer. Basically, my dream is to help SMBs, small and medium companies that have heard that, hey, this machine learning stuff is the new hotness. They want to try it out, but they don't know exactly what it is. How can they approach it? And unfortunately, there are lots of machine learning services companies that promise them that, oh yeah, we can do any kind of machine learning project for you, and it will solve all your problems and your revenue will go up 10 times and whatnot. And they charge a lot of money for that. And 2 years later, they've got nothing to show for it. And they'll blame, oh, there's not enough data, there's not a time, that they'll blame a lot of other things, and the client will be unhappy. I was just to help them learn about, hey, this is machine learning, this is what you can do, and consult them basically on, hey, is this feasible or not? Or is this something that you can afford? Or like, this is how much it would cost. Can you afford that or not?
I mean, I'm curious, how many of the companies that pitch AI products would you say are essentially snake oil salesmen?
There's two different problems. One is that there are companies that promise too much that, hey, AI can solve all your problems, and it actually can't. And then there are companies that try to make an AI product, but they realize that for each customer that they take on, they will have to do so much work to customize that AI model for that client that it's just not worth it. Like, it doesn't scale. In software engineering, you're used to, hey, I'm making a product, I'm making a software as a service, I'm selling it, and I'm getting rich because I have 1 million users, and I'm still doing the same effort as with 1,000 users. But with AI models, it's often not the case. For if you switch even a slight domain or apply it to something else, you have to retrain the models, you have to invest a lot of work in cleaning up the data. And because of this, many AI services that actually try to do legit AI services end up getting beaten, then they overpromise or try to do more than they can bite.
So any new trends you're spotting, and what do you feel like the future is, the taxing in Romania, if you can give us a quick rundown?
Historically, IT in Romania has been dominated by outsourcing companies. Like, there were lots of companies doing development for clients, mostly in either the US or UK or other places like that, because it was cheaper than in the West. Slowly, the salaries for IT have gone up, so it's not that much more cheaper. The good part of this is that now we are starting to see a lot more local startups that have their own product, and they are trying to make something new and innovative, and that's a lot more value added locally. So that's really great.
Yeah, hopefully you finish your pool soon enough by summer, and we can all visit.
Please do.
Okay, so if people want to find you and connect with you more, where can people find you, Roland?
All right. So on the internet, I can usually be found under my favorite nickname, Rollis. That's ROLISZ. I have a website under rollis.ro, or you can email me at consulting@rollis.ro or anything like that.
And are you on Twitter?
Yes. Same handle, ROLISZ.
And Seb, where can people find you to disagree with you, in fairness to Google?
Yeah, you can tell me how Google is great at Seb Moss on Twitter. Google me or Bing me or DuckDuckGo me and find out more personal details about me.
And Max?
Yes, you can find me on aibusiness.com talking about AI business, and on Twitter under Max Smolaks.
And you can find me mostly on LinkedIn, actually, at this point, at Tien Fu, because I just have to promote this podcast.
That sounds awful.
Not on Instagram anymore?
Oh, no, I'm still on Instagram. Wait, are you now on Instagram?
No.
Oh, no wonder you haven't liked my photos.